Well, The Wealth of Nations was published that year, that's right. And it provided a rationale for the free market, the laissez-faire idea. Governments stay out of the way. That's not what I'm thinking of.
Declaration.
Well, the Declaration was a revolt against mercantilism. Before Adam Smith devastated the idea of mercantilism and exposed it, and he said the wealth is not money. Money is just an exchange medium for real wealth, which is fishnets, or plows, or flocks, or factories, the real wealth. And so there was the revolt against mercantilism. The colonies revolted against George III and the Tea Act and the Stamp Act and the Navigation Acts and the Intolerable Acts. It was a revolt against this idea of economic domination by a mother country. Send out the colonies, bring in raw materials, send back the manufactured goods. That was mercantilism, and the American Revolution was against that. That's not what I'm thinking of. What else happened in 1776? There was an economic revolution, a very important economic event. And before 1776, the energy source was human, was muscles.
Steam engine.
The steam engine. James Watt patented the first steam engine in 1776. And once Watt taught men how to harness fuel, anything became possible. You could send a man to the moon. Before 1776, it was muscle energy, the sun. You know, it all stemmed from the sun. The sun shines on the earth. The plants convert light energy to sugar, photosynthesis. Men eat the plants, or the animals eat the plants, and the men eat the animals. The sun was the source, or the sun would evaporate water, spill it on the mountains. Men would catch it as it ran down. Or the sun would cause meteorological disturbances, and you'd harness this with a windmill. But the source was the sun. But in 1776, Watt taught men to harness fuel. And then anything became possible, even to bringing women out of the kitchens, if you put a materialist interpretation on history. So, between 1776, the Revolutionary War period, and the Civil War, the textile industry was mechanized. And these steam engines were put on moving platforms, boats, and railroads began to develop. And the cost of transportation went down. And you could pump water out of the coal mines, so anybody who bought coal found that the price of coal went down. And each of these technological innovations would raise productivity, would raise wages. And then between the Civil War and the First World War, with the mechanization of the farms and internal combustion and some electrification, wages doubled again. And between the First World War and the Second World War, and now you're getting into electronics and aviation, all manner of electrification. Each of these technological innovations raised living standards, so 2 times 2 times 2. In that period of 200 years, 1776 to 1976, real wages went up about 12-fold. Nobody planned it that way. It was the invisible hand at work. Adam Smith would have understood this very well. Wages were going up with productivity, and productivity was a function of technology. So can we say that we have high living standards in the United States because we have the world's most abundant resources? The American Indians, before the white men came, had the same resources, but they didn't have the same technology. And the Swiss and the Japanese, who have practically no resources in their national borders, the Swiss have water power but not too much else, have a very high living standard. In effect, the resources, the world's resources, are available to the highest bidder. They're available to whoever wants to pay the price. Everybody has resources. It isn't American wheat, Brazilian coffee, Iranian oil. It belongs to the highest bidder. It belongs to the world. So we don't have high living standards because we have the highest development of natural resources. Well, then, is it human energy? Are we supermen? Well, of course, we're made up of all nations and all races. And you'll find in Asia the living standards are very high in Japan and Taiwan, but they're very low in Korea. They're low in China, mainland China. But they're rising faster in some of these areas than any other place. Well, then is the answer time? Well, we all have 24 hours in the day, and of course the answer is technology. Starting from simple spear throwers spear bearers, continuing on to the pastoral and agricultural people, and then you get into the Industrial Revolution, and living standards really take off. You can say, in effect, that the level of wages is in proportion to technology, and that the capitalist himself would never voluntarily raise wages. It isn't his nature. You perhaps have heard of Samuel Gompers, the founder of the AFL. And he was, at the turn of the century, probably the most important labor leader in the country. And they came to Mr. Gompers and they said, Gompers, you keep asking for more for the workers. You ask for higher wages, you ask for a shorter work week, you ask for vacations, you ask for fringe benefits. Can you sum it up? What is it that the workers want? And what did he answer? More. More. And you know, what is it that the businessman wants? More. And what is it that the housewife wants when she goes to the store? She wants more. And the teachers want more. And it's just what makes the world turn. Economic actors want more. They want to buy cheap and sell dear. And every business conference I've ever been to, trade show, whether it's the sporting goods manufacturers, the Work Glove Institute, the National Shoe Fair, the businessmen say two things. They say the prices that we have to pay are too high. We pay too much for energy, we pay too much for labor, we pay too much for construction. Costs are just terrible. And on the other hand, they say, we can't get enough for our product. And what they're saying, in effect, is more. We want more. Would the businessman voluntarily raise wages? No way. He tries to hold his costs down, and it's not his intention to raise wages at all, and yet wages kept rising. The businessman is stimulated by the desire for profit. That's why he starts his business. That's why James Watt invented the steam engine. It's why Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, which he patented, and then people ran around the patent. It was so easy to make. He couldn't make it stick. He invented interchangeable parts to make rifles for the Army. Then he had to invent the machine tools to make the interchangeable parts. He did this all to make a profit. And by doing it, he extended the institution of slavery because people could now take seeds out of cotton more easily than they could before. And slavery got new birth in the United States because of Eli Whitney. But also the price of textiles came down, and the price of clothing came down, and real wages were rising because textiles were cheap. And the inventors of the steam engine, the inventors of railroad, Henry Ford and his assembly line, McCormick and his reaper, each of these technical innovations raised living standards. The businessman didn't do this in order to help humanity or raise wages. He did it to make a profit. That's what made the businessman tick. But he was disciplined by competition. The businessman does not decide what he pays in the way of wages. The businessman does not decide what he pays for anything. He goes into the market. And these prices are set by impersonal market decisions. And the actions of businessmen and capitalists and entrepreneurs are not arbitrary. They're simply subject to the laws of the market. The businessman is always under the discipline of competition. So wages are in proportion to capital investment, and profits tend to be in proportion to capital investment. And would anybody like to hazard a guess as to how many dollars of capital there are behind every worker in the United States today? About $70,000. And this is going to vary a lot from one industry to another. There are labor-intensive industries, and there are capital-intensive industries. But the average of all industry is about $70,000. And the person who has $70,000 to invest will get a real return adjusted for inflation of about 6%, which would be about $4,000, wouldn't it? $4,200 if you were going to be exact. If you were the capitalist with that $70,000, you could get about 6% or $4,000. And the average wage earner in the United States, the average salary, fringe benefits and so on, is about $20,000. So the pie is split. About 1/6 goes to the capitalist and about 5/6 goes to the worker. Nobody planned it that way. It's that way as far back as I'm able to discover in statistics.